Firstly, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I was just saying to Bolu, Uday and Vicky and Gus, it's always a bone of contention at what time of the day you host these webinars, and we've done, this is my 16th webinar over the last 18 months, and as I say, you do them first thing, you do them at the end of the day, you do them in the middle of the day. So thank you so much for everyone who's joined us this morning, and as I said earlier on, we're recording the webinar. So for those of you, all of your cameras have now been enabled. So if you do want to come onto camera, this is a roundtable discussion. It is totally interactive. So if you're happy to be part of the recording, then great. If not, feel free to enable your microphone and still please be part of the conversation. But obviously our topic this morning is around diversity, equity and inclusion and the continuing closing of the talent gap in life sciences. And actually this is the third discussion I've done on this topic over the last 4 or 5 years on behalf of Page. And I think it's one that's continuously evolving. And I'm pleased to say one that is moving in the right direction. However, we are still quite a considerable way off where we would obviously clearly like to be. But before we go into the sort of the body of the conversation, I just briefly want to introduce some of our speakers this morning who I'll be passing over to very shortly, and also say a massive thank you to them as a starting point. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Uday Bose, Managing Director and Head of Human Pharmaceuticals at Boehringer Ingelheim, UK and Ireland. Good morning, Uday. Thank you for joining us. Also would like to say a massive welcome to Gus Romano-Jackson, Head of HR, Legal and Compliance at Sumitomo Chemical UK, and also our very own Bolu Fassian, UK DE&I Manager for us here at Page Group. So a massive welcome to all three of you, and thank you for joining us this morning. I guess what I'd like to do as a starting point, just to sort of test the temperature of the room really from everyone, is do a quick temperature check. So using the chat function, this is going to test our technology skills at 7:30 in the morning, but just using the chat function, I just wanted to ask each of you individually on how confident are you around your organization's ability to tackle EDI right now? 5 being we're very well equipped, 1 being we're right at the start of the journey. Just as a sort of starting point. Okay. Loving the honesty, Ruth. Okay, keep them coming in. Some pretty good figures on there. Good. It'll be interesting to see by the end of the call on where those are, whether we can improve off of those, and also whether some of the statistics I'm about to go through sort of ring true with some of your experience. So I'm just going to set the scene before I pass over to Bolu and the panel. But we've looked at a sort of collection of data across multiple reports, and I'm happy to share those reports with people after the conversation. But as I said at the start, you know, life sciences is one of the frontier leading sectors that has, frankly, been leading on improving our existing circumstances around how we go about approaching EDI. And when you look at the statistics over the last 10 years, there has been a significant improvement. But I also think, looking at these figures that are from the back end of 2020, we're still a hell of a long way off from where we should be. And when we look closely at certainly when we look at gender, when we look at ethnicity, the journey is absolutely ongoing. And I've pulled out some of the figures here. Livestream did a study at the back end of 2020. They're actually in the process of doing their current study, which is due to be published in the next month and a half. They looked at 125 businesses in the UK life science market, mixture of both listed multinational and small medium-sized startup, and looked at both gender and ethnicity, both at board, exec level, and also senior leadership. And I think it's really quite telling that, again, from where we were probably about 8 or 9 years ago, where these figures broadly were under 10%, we're now actually at a point where, again, from a gender point of view, 14.8% at board level, executive management level, 21%. 10 years ago, that figure was way under 10%. Women board participation was under 5%. When looking at ethnicity, board participation, again, this was under 5% 10 years ago. Executive management level, again, under 5%. But still staggeringly, 70% of those 125 businesses have still have zero racial diversity at board level. In addition to this, when we look at the landscape of organizations in our sector, in the life sciences sector, the one thing we can look at is the foundation of our sector, which is going back to the next generation, those that are in education, school leavers, university. And actually, this for me, having been part of this conversation for the last 10 years, is really about the amount of drain we get from school in transition to industry. And actually, I personally feel this is where the greatest problem lies. When we look at, again, stats that you see in front of you, when we look at the undergraduate population and the proportion of those that we lose out on from education into industry, but also the significant difference between the population of those at undergraduate level to those that then hold qualified positions, is incredibly concerning. Um, Also, when we look at ethnic minority, it's exactly the same. 37% of our undergraduate population are of ethnic minority. However, only 6.3% hold qualified position. And one thing that is probably becoming more prominent in the conversation is around neurodiversity, and this is something that we've looked at in quite close detail over the last 3 or 4 years. And actually, again, neurodiversity is something that makes up just less than 30% of our undergraduate population. However, in life sciences, less than 8%. There is a less than 8% representation in qualified positions, which again I think is a huge opportunity for the sector, because neurodiversity has a hell of a lot to give in our sector, and there is huge benefit, as we're already finding in parts of our of the life sciences industry in numerous different ways, and again, significantly lower proportion of representation than we see in other sectors. Where do the issues lie? I've tried to pull out some of the issues, some of the key issues. I think the ones that stand out to me is, as I've talked about, the um, the existential gender and ethnicity pay gap is an ongoing issue, and this is something we see across all sectors across the piece. The only piece of confidence I can give on gender and ethnicity pay gap, and what we've seen certainly in the last 3 years, this has significantly reduced. And actually, life sciences and tech have been the two sectors that have been working extremely hard to close that gap and have showed significant progress in comparison to other sectors. Um, Currently, on the last piece of data I could certainly pick up was from GT, was showing 12% on gender and 4% on ethnicity. Um, from speaking to one of my contacts actually at PwC on a piece of work that they've just finished, it actually shows that's also come down yet again. And actually, they believe that gender is actually just under 4%, and ethnicity is now down to 0.0 of a percentile point on the businesses that they reviewed. So that's encouraging. And once that data comes out, I'm happy to share that onwards with all of our attendees. The other couple of points I want to pick out on this slide is just around visibility. I, I want to give an example of a lady that I met on Monday who I interviewed, and she was a neurodiverse candidate, somebody who had studied at a red brick, was all A's through GCSE, all A's at A level, had achieved a first class in biomedical science, and actually throughout her whole academic career, science had been her core passion. And besides that journey and having come out with a first class degree in biomedical science, She then approached a number of clients in industry about pursuing a career in life sciences. And there was only one organization that came back to her and offered her the opportunity to spend the day in one of their laboratories down in London and shadowing their lab manager for the day, just to give her an idea as to what the sector had to offer. And needless to say, off the back of that day of shadowing, she's chosen to not move into the sector. And it's for a number of different reasons. And certainly from understanding a bit about her experience on that day, there wasn't a huge amount done to sell the opportunity of what can be achieved or the prescriptive nature around how she could progress and have a career in the industry. But given that was only one organization of what she believed was 8 or 9 organizations that she'd approached, that's a classic example of where someone's academically achieved extremely well, pursued sciences throughout, and we've essentially lost her possibly to accounting, possibly to legal, or possibly to consultancy. And interestingly, when I asked her about her cohort at her university from 2021, of the 19 people on her course, only one of them that she is aware of has ended up in our sector. And I really think this is a great example of a lack of visibility and a lack of engagement from industry and education. And this is just one of many challenges, but I thought this was a really good example just from Monday of somebody who, as I say, her passion clearly sits in the sciences, yet she feels as though she doesn't have a strong enough understanding or a strong enough appeal to be able to pursue it further in industry. I guess the final piece I want to pull out here is around application and interview. And we spend a hell of a lot of time talking about retention. We talk about the ability to um, I guess, offer an inclusive interview process. But actually, there's a huge amount here around inclusive application. And actually, when we think about neurodiversity, particularly, I still feel as though, as an industry, we aren't doing enough to provide an inclusive experience to those uh, from a neurodiverse background. And I think we can be doing a lot more to be creative and discuss ideas and in some ways trial new ways of trying to bring those from a neurodiverse background into our sector and feeling comfortable and having a more accessible experience through the interview process. I still feel we're extremely weak as a sector, and actually recruitment in general is not doing enough, I don't think, to um, support a more inclusive application and an interview process. Obviously, we're still in one of the greatest candidate shortages, just in terms of that last point, and clearly that compounds this whole problem where we are at a period of where we have incredibly low levels of employment. There's still a high level of recruitment activity, which does give the candidate a high level of choice, and this makes both retention and attraction significantly more difficult without all of these other issues at play. So finally, I just want to raise some of the drivers here that we and GT and the Sanger Institute feel as though are some of the, I guess, significant players in what's led to the progress that has been made in the last 3 or 4 years. And again, to pick some of them out, creating a sense of belonging is consistent throughout all of these. And I feel like creating a sense of belonging is something that we've done extremely well at Page Group, which I'm sure Bolu will go into. Intentionality, as I said right at the start of the call, life sciences is one of the few sectors that I think have truly shown a purposeful move, a deliberate move to look more closely around addressing ED&I as a sector. I still, as I've said a few times, when we look at recognizing the strength of neurodiversity, I think that's a journey that we're probably right at the start of, but I feel that's a massive opportunity. Developing external partnerships and looking at how we can build a bridge between education and industry. I feel there's a massive opportunity there to change perceptions in the market around what life sciences is about the career paths that are available, And I think in some ways, um, beginning to look at how, you know, disciplines like accountancy, like legal, like HR, who can be quite prescriptive about what a career path could look like. I think we could actually look at those particular disciplines and really look at actually how we could start to um, I guess, portray life sciences as an industry in a similar way. And I think a lot of our school leavers, graduates, look at those industries and probably get comfort from the fact on how prescriptive it can be around career development in comparison to life sciences. Um, Hopefully, that gives you a sense of where we're up to and clearly the journey that we're on. And hopefully also stimulates a little bit of the conversation for later on. But for now, I'd like to pass over to Bolo from our very own page group. Bolo, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Morning, everyone. And once again, thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning. Actually, what I'd like to do now is introduce our two panelists, Uday and Goss. They have a lot of experience in the life sciences, and individually in their organizations, they've done a variety of things to close the gap. You know, we've seen a lot of stats today and just generally on the difficulty when it comes to inclusion and diversity in the industry. And Uday, if I come to you first, just to introduce yourself and a quick summary of who you and what you do. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much. So again, thank you to Ryan and the team for the invitation. So yeah, my name is Uday Bose. I'm the managing director for Boehringer Ingelheim. We're a German headquartered pharmaceutical and animal health company, about 52,000 employees globally. And as I say, active in both human and animal health, and we manufacture products as well. So here in the UK, we're an organization of about 650 people. We have a manufacturing site out in Surrey, and our headquarters are based here in Bracknell. And I've been in this role as managing director for 4 years. Prior to that, I was in our corporate headquarters in Germany, and similar to what Ryan was saying, I fell into this sector. It wasn't a sector that I targeted. I studied economics and finance and investment at university, and the typical path was accountancy. A group like the Page Group approached me for some temping work. Back in those days, I used to do some temping work. So I got a temp job working with an epidemiologist for Procter & Gamble Pharmaceuticals, which nobody really knew. They had a very small pharmaceuticals division, and started working there, and then got role as a health economist, and then progressed through. And I have to say, honestly, it's not until recently in my career that I've dared to look around me in terms of the topic of diversity. I've always been raised with the view that you have as much opportunity as anybody else, and you just have to go for it. Don't look for differences. Look for yourself, and just focus on your own growth and your development. But as you become a leader, I think, in an organization, you become naturally more receptive. And when I look at the statistics that Ryan's presented, and there's other data from the Science Industry Partnership from a few years ago as well, the statistics are frankly unacceptable. And again, as somebody who now has a leadership opportunity here in the UK, but also globally, it's a mission of mine to try and address this, talk about this, which is, again, why I'm so grateful for the invitation today. So really looking forward to the discussion, and thanks again for the invite.
Thank you so much. It was a story. I think Ryan mentioned it earlier. Most people go from life sciences into economics and stuff, but you've done the opposite.
Yeah.
You've gone from going into economics into life sciences.
Exactly.
How interesting. Thank you for that, Uday. Gus, I'm going to come to you next.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Sorry, I think, is it my volume? I can't hear you quite loudly.
Can anyone else hear me? Yeah,
Okay.
good. So, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. As a background, I'm a lawyer, which is very interesting to be here talking about HR. I'm a lawyer by training and by profession, but I'm currently the head of HR, legal and compliance at Sumitomo Chemical UK. Sumitomo, the company itself, has originally from Japan, as you can guess, has been around in different forms for more than 400 years, which for Japanese time scale is average lifespan. And the Sumitomo Chemical, the division of chemical inside Sumitomo, was formally created in 1913. And in 1945, as part of the peace agreement following the Second World War, Sumitomo, as many other large Japanese organizations like Nissan, Mitsubishi, and so on, were split in many different subdivisions, including the formal creation and the formal listing of Sumitomo Chemical as a separate legal entity from other Sumitomo named organizations. And today we are listed in the Tokyo Exchange. We have around 200 affiliates globally, revenues around 22 billion per year, and around 40,000 colleagues operating in over 50 countries. And we are, the name says it all, chemicals. So everything you can imagine, if you have ever touched the screen of an iPhone, you touched our technology. We are providing the active ingredients in some of the leading, most important psychiatric, neurological, diabetic, oncological, regenerative drugs globally. If you have ever been in a car manufactured in Europe, other than Rolls-Royce, you certainly have touched and you have seen our polymers, whether it's on your dashboard or whether in the bumper of your car, and so on. From agribusiness to insecticides, we are everywhere, even though you might not immediately click to our brand. And the reason I'm saying that is first to use a little bit the opportunity to do some PR, but to talk a little bit about the challenges we have as an organization, because operating such a diverse global footprint, such a diversity of different sectors in the chemicals industry, we do face some really, really interesting challenges in terms of inclusion, diversity, and equity. And I would be very happy here to share some of our successes, some of our failures, some of our data. And obviously, some of the things that we will be sharing here are things that are somehow give us some competitive advantage. And the reason why we want to share is because we see this as a win-win for society. We will only move the needle when we start working and sharing and collaborating our experiences, including our failures, so we do not repeat the same mistakes as each other. And that's why being an incredibly socially focused organization, we are happy to share some of our experience, some of our real data here with you guys this morning.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Gus, for that. You mentioned such an interesting point. I remember when I first moved into EDI, there was this sort of information guarding. Only our organization wants to do really well, so let's not share with other people what we're doing. But the reality is, people move around a lot. And if as an industry, we do better within organizations and we're able to share those learns, the challenges, we're able to make each other better and we challenge each other to invest. So I think it's fantastic that you're willing to share with that. So thank you so much. Before I come to ask you guys questions, I'm going to now just say to the audience, like, any questions that you have at all, please put them in the chat. I've got some questions off the back of the introduction that Gus and Uday have made already, but we're really keen for people to, whether it be you actually want to share some of the things that you've done, or you're just really curious, you're starting off on your EDI journey, there are things that you're struggling with, navigating, have concerns, please feel free to share them in the chat. But I will ask first, actually, and I'll come to you first, Uday. We've spoken a lot around like the challenges of the DI journey, and you spoke about when you first started in the industry, you didn't really look around much, and now you have, and you've been implementing a lot of things over the last couple of years. What would you say you found the most challenging navigating DEI in your space?
Oh, I think it's all, once you start, it's one of those things, once you start uncovering it, it's quite overwhelming, actually, because the basic premise that really got me focused on it was actually when you go on field visits, when you go and see customers, you are reminded that the society that we as a sector exist to serve is incredibly diverse, right? So if you go to I live in London, so anytime I go on a field visit into a GP practice, into a hospital, I was at Guy's and St Thomas's last week, the level of diversity in terms of the patient population, as well as the physicians, the pharmacists, the nurses, the healthcare workers, is huge. And then you turn and look at your own organization and you don't see that. And then you wonder why from a purely a commercial perspective, our inability to connect well with our customers is one of the biggest commercial challenges that we face, right, as an organization. So why is it that we develop messages or we put campaigns out there and it doesn't connect as well? So that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is making sure that our activities internally reflect the diversity of the customer population that we serve. And the other challenge is you can bring diversity in. It's not, I think it's relatively easy, but the inclusivity is more important, because there's no point bringing somebody in who's got that experience, who's got that background, but for them to feel like they can't bring that to the table and that they've only been appointed because of their technical skills and their qualifications. So I make a point of every opportunity I have, welcome days when new recruits coming in, to say, before you get overwhelmed by the day job and the to-do list, always remind yourself why you're here and who you are and where you've come from, and never feel afraid or ashamed to be able to share that, because that's what we're looking for. And I need managers to pull that out as well. So managers need to ask people about, in your last, even from a CV perspective, it's very rare you ask somebody, in your previous company, what did you do there? How would you have addressed this challenge then? Yeah. So there are huge challenges, Bolu, but the quick answer is and that's why I put a 5, because I think, Ryan, your question was, your ability to do something, and I think we have all the ability to be able to do it. Doing it is another rating, to be honest, but we have all the opportunity to do it.
That's such a good point. You spoke a lot. You spoke there around the difference between diversity and inclusion. I think, if we're being completely transparent, that's something that we're navigating ourselves as an organization right now. We've done a lot over the last couple of years to bring in diversity, but it's one thing to hire diversity. It's another thing to make them feel included in the business. Because what we're finding now is a lot of people are obviously hiring diversity, but the diversity is leaving very quickly because the environment is not conducive for them to thrive. So Gus, I'll actually come to you next, actually. Taking it off track here when we're talking about diversity and inclusion. Uday spoke about the difference between the two. As an organization, you've done a lot around hiring diversity. What sorts of initiatives have you put in place to drive the inclusion piece, particularly?
Oh, that's a really, really interesting question, Bolo. There are initiatives in this culture, and I think that you have to work with both things in parallel there. There are lots of initiatives, policies, processes, etc., that you can do to enhance the diversity of the human pool that you have, to attract, to retain them. But there's also the culture that permeates everything. People need, as you said, to feel that they belong. And that a policy in itself, or a series of policies, will not resolve it. People really need to trust the leadership. They really need to trust that you are not just talking the talk, but you are walking the walk, and sometimes running the run, which is for us has been a very interesting challenge. I'm very fortunate to work with leadership teams in many different countries across Europe. One thing that I observed is that the personality of the leadership team, not just style, but the personality that they have as a group, is really, really important. Leaders that are able to show empathy and feel the empathy, they are really interesting to work with in terms of inclusion and diversity, because even though they might not belong to one of those clusters of minority clusters, if they are able to at least try to feel how those that are below them, or on the bottom of the chain, or outside the chain altogether, feel they can work, or we can work with them to change the status. Yeah. And that for us has been absolutely incredible to see some of our leaders embracing some really difficult and sometimes terrifying decisions, because are things that no one has done. We don't have a blueprint, but we feel intrinsically that we need to do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
No. I was going to just emphasize the point that you made, like just basically with your answer, the importance of empathy and understanding the people that you work with, I think are such key points when it comes to inclusion, because the DAO has moved a lot. You know, there's a way that people used to manage in the past. It used to be like sometimes very authoritative, but actually with building a culture of inclusion, it's really important that whether or not you belong to a demographic, you're able to understand the day-to-day struggles of the people that you work with. Because I think the more you understand, the more you're able to put things in place to support them. Uday, I'm going to ask you the same question with inclusion. What sorts of initiatives as you as an organization put in place to encourage inclusion within the organization?
I mean, the first thing is, basic thing is talking about it, right? Is inviting in, creating the space for it to happen. I think this is one of those areas where I think the pandemic really helped managers, because as we're doing here, this whole screen kind of based culture, it kind of forces people to look for voices, to go around the screen and make sure, let me make sure every voice is being heard. So that kind of practice we've really tried to make sure continues. Now we're back in the face-to-face environment. So reminding managers to seek opinions. We also realize and recognize that actually sometimes it's not that people don't want to, but they're not confident to, they don't feel courageous, they don't feel comfortable to share their views. So it's also about creating those other spaces, those other opportunities. And again, whether it's a one-to-one, whether it's smaller groups, we have tried focus groups as well. I have to be honest, I don't think those work. Also, as a participant, as somebody who's invited to a focus group, I really like being invited for what I know, not because of the color of my skin or what I represent as an ethnic minority. And I think that's one kind of, maybe it's a chip on my shoulder, but I have this, I always worry when I'm getting invited because I want to make sure it's for what I can bring. So when we've tried to do focus groups, I think people have commented that it feels like it's almost reverse discriminating, because you're doing something very specifically for one particular group. And the whole point that we're trying to build is inclusivity, is integration, right? I don't need a group of ethnic minority colleagues telling me things. I need that to happen within the wider ecosystem. So yeah, the main thing is around creating the space, making managers and briefing managers that they're more conscious to seek those views out. And then when you get those views, to share those views and give them a platform to say, look, this is what we've heard, this is what we've picked up. We're very fortunate. We work in healthcare, so we do a lot of work around patient perspectives, carer perspectives. So it's also incredibly business relevant, right? We just did something recently around patient insights, patient information, and how different communities regard disease, conditions, diagnoses, and sometimes it's quite...
Hi, Erica. How are you?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good to hear. I'm
I'm
not doing
sorry. I
too
think
bad,
someone is,
thank you.
oh, sorry, excuse me. Someone's not got their mic muted.
No.
Okay.
We've sorted it.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so it goes back to the insights from patients and carers, and we found once we tap into that emotion with our employees in terms of healthcare, society, what can you bring to your communities, that does spark an additional level of engagement, which we're capitalizing on.
Thank you for that, Uday. We've got a question in the chat, which I'm going to come to in 1 second. But just to summarize the points that both you and Gus made, I think one of the key things with building inclusion or encouraging inclusion within an organization is to actually listen to your people. I think sometimes organizations, when they want to do better with the right intentions, they go off and be like, right, this is what we're going to do, but actually listen to what their people need. I think the starting point is actually figuring out the people that we work with, what do they want us to do more? What are we currently doing well? And what would they want us to do differently? And then you spoke about when they then give you that information, keeping them up to date with what you have done with that information. Because again, that is another sticking point sometimes we find with clients. They do focus groups, they ask questions, they do surveys, and they might be doing something with that information, but they don't feed back that information. So people are not aware of what is being done. So it makes them feel like, well, I'm not going to give you feedback again because I did it once and you've not told me anything you're doing about it. Even if it's just internal conversations are happening, I completely agree about the importance of keep people up to date. Like, thank you for giving us this feedback. This is what we're doing with it. It might take us 3 years to implement, but this is what we're doing with it. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So Kathy in the chat has asked a question about how so I'll be interested to hear how attendees are supporting employees with mental health challenges. This is such a key thing right now. I think with everything going on in the world as well, we've just come back from a pandemic. We have the cost of living crisis. We have like the markets, tech, for example, moving, a lot of redundancies being made. There's a lot of things that can affect employees' mental well-being. So I don't know if anyone else in the audience has anything to share on what their organization have done so far? I know we've got some stuff, but it'd be really good to hear from other people about some of the things that you're putting in place to support your employees. Maybe and Gus as well, of course, if you have anything to share on that, please.
I mean, for me, it's a very timely topic. So, and it's a great question, Kathy, and thanks for putting your camera on so we can see you as well. So, again, that the pandemic was a great opportunity and reminder that what people were facing while they were at home. As a leader for me, so I used to do a vlog. I used to do a weekly vlog from home, from my reality, my real situation, because it mirrored what others were doing as well. And the feedback on that was so positive, right? Because people were struggling. You know, I literally, I was sat opposite my 7-year-old daughter in class. It was horrific. It was very, very difficult. But talking about these things again, it's very similar to the diversity and inclusion topic. We have to talk about these things and create that safe space. But the one thing I would say, Kathy, is once you start doing this as an organization, you have to keep going. You cannot then, it cannot be something that you just did then, or we just did something. So the reason I said it's very topical.
Tick a box or...
Yeah, because today we have a town hall meeting. And as an executive committee today, we've decided to do something which is quite unprecedented in September of this year, to talk about the salary inflation for next year. We would never, ever do that. That is not something that, because we don't have our end of year final results yet. There's messages that have to come down from corporate. But I know, you know, and I know, you know, employees in this building are coming in and they're very, very anxious because they don't know how they're going to pay their mortgages. They don't know how they're going to get through Christmas and the New Year. They're hearing about colleagues being, you know, made redundant and companies closing down. Our healthcare sector at the moment in the UK, because of rebate rates with government and all of that, is really in disarray. So there's a lot of anxiety in the organization. So we have to address that. And we as an exec-com said, no, we're going to talk about it today. We're going to have an open session in the town hall. And we're going to be as transparent as we've been amongst ourselves. Because, again, we know it's bothering people, so we have to talk about it. We can't just ignore it. So that's what I would say, Kathy. If you start it, please don't do it as like a one-off, though. For this week, we're going to have this opportunity to talk to people. You got to, once you open the doors, you got to keep the conversations going.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Uday. I'm just gonna Goss, were you gonna say something? Sorry.
Yeah, from our side, I've tried to list a few things, and I think at least 8 things here that we have been doing. One is to understand the underlying cause of these mental issues that people might be suffering. Quite often, what we get is the consequences of that. And we need to understand what exactly is triggering that. So it's taking the time for us to go and speak to people and again, listen, proactively listen to understand what's the cause there. In terms of policies and practical things that we do and have been doing, we have introduced a personal time off policy in the organization that allows employees to take up to 10 days per year without any medical prescription, anything like that. Just tell us, I need some time for myself. Don't tell us whether it's for you to take your child to his or her first day at school, or whether it's just because you want one day to cool off, or whether because you need some time to deal with your divorce or your wedding preparation. We don't need to know. It's your time off. It's your space there. We do have, and we have had over the last 3 years, something called water cooler, which is when we went on lockdown, we were very concerned about mental health care, about mental health, and we introduced daily at 10 a.m. from 10 to 11, a water cooler where whoever wants to come to a Teams chat like this one. You can talk about anything but work. Everybody would be there. If you want to talk about your music, which is WhatsApp, whatever, fair game, it's fine. Yes, right. It's on the top of the annual leave. Yeah, that's the personal on the chat that Brian asked. That's on the top of the annual leave, and also on the top of Christmas closure and things like that. So we do have this water cooler where the managing directors, the executive directors were showing up as well and acting as equals. That's the key one of the water cooler. Everybody is equal there. If you want to show up and everybody, I think Ryan has caught me a few times coming out of a water cooler with my black t-shirt, and that is that. Since then, we moved from, because the office now partially reopened, not fully, partially reopened, we asked people, do you want to carry on? They said, yes, we still have water cooler once a week, Fridays, tomorrow between 10 and 11, we have a water cooler. Again, you can talk about anything but work. Financials. Yes, financials is an underlying issue. We take our moral and ethical obligation to pay well our employees, pay fairly, incredibly seriously. So we did a massive salary review earlier this year before the inflation spike, because we knew it would happen. We actually have been talking about this for 2 years. We might have got it wrong by a year. I was predicting this 1 year before, happened this year, but it's something that we have been working very serious, and we do have an employee loan scheme on subsidized rates, where if you are suffering some shortcomings, financial shortcomings, come to us, because people take stupid decisions if they are pressured financially. That's when desperation is a very bad advisor.
Yeah.
Come trust us. We are here for you. If things are not working for you, speak to us. We're going to find a solution. We obviously offer external support, especially support for free. And obviously, we don't have any insight of what to discuss, anything like that. Two other things that we do is clarity of career paths. A lot of anxiety is generated by people not knowing what's going to happen to them in the future. We as a Japanese company, we very rarely let people go, because we take the selection process very, very seriously. It takes one bad apple to rotten the whole basket. So we make the life of our colleagues at Michael Page a nightmare, because we do take the selection super, super serious. People stay with us for 18 and a half years on average. So we have very honest, open discussions with them where things are going. We've been around for centuries. We have seen crisis time and again. We have seen world wars. This is a minor hiccup for us. This is where you are going individually. And the other one is feeling. The water cooler works both ways. It's a place for people to speak, but it's also a place for us to observe people when they are not in the office. Because a few times we got, okay, this person is slightly different from their normal selves today. Let's give him or her a call and have a chat whether there's anything we can do. And it's whether it's me, whether it's the managing director, whether it's one of the other executives. We just go, hey, how are you doing today? Is there anything that we can do for you? We are here for you if you need. I can tell you that almost every single week I send an email to someone, look, how things are going. And we do have every single person that in our organization, we try to have bi-monthly catch-ups. We call it director's lunch. Funny enough, we have never taken one for lunch, but let's spend 1 hour talking about you.
Yeah.
And it's normally the managing director and myself sitting there, whether it's the most junior trainee, whether it's a fellow executive. We have that chat with them, which is an opportunity for us to talk about anything they want, that they not feel completely comfortable speaking to others.
Thank you so much, Gus.
Bolu, could I just dive in just 1 second? Because
Mhm.
Gus, I think just 2 things I just want to pick up on there. I think that there's a lot of good stuff in that, but there's 2 things. One of which I can definitely agree with on is around the annual leave, which is why I asked you about whether you do 10 days on top of your contractual annual leave, which I think is really impressive. Actually, something we trialed as a business 3 years ago was a mental health half day. And we rolled this out across the UK, and it was received so well. And actually, off the back of that, we've then added a full day onto it. Now, 10 days is absolutely phenomenal. But actually, just on that day, what we really noticed, and Kathy, hopefully this will resonate with you as well. what we noticed is that typically when people book annual leave, it's purposeful because they're going on holiday or there's something particularly, happening in the diary. What we found with the mental health day was it wasn't purposeful. It was for a day to walk. It was for a day to go out with sort of impromptu spontaneity with friends. It was to go to the golf course. It was something that was sort of non-purposeful, if that makes sense. And I thought that was really noticeable. And I think the other bit is about giving the platform to listen. And I totally agree with that. A lot of the time, we don't give the platform where we can actually listen. We ask, how are you? But we don't have the time to actually truly understand the answer to that question. The not bad, okay, then we move into the purpose of the conversation. There's never quite that platform to ask the question 3 times. So I think those
Yes.
2 bits are so important.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you so much for that. Actually, those are great points. And in terms of the platform to listen, one thing I recommend, Kathy, if you guys don't already have it, is we have mental health first aiders in our organization. We've trained mental health first aiders, so they're just colleagues like ourselves, but we put them through the mental health first aider training. I think there is resource online for that as well. So actually, there are designated people who are trained in navigating mental health, navigating concerns, and it's sometimes the little things like the language and like calling it something else over something else that will make people react. So that would be a really good one as well. Conscious we only have about 30 minutes left. Eve has asked a question in the chat, and Uday, I'm going to come to you for this one. The question is, to improve inclusion, we also need to remember that not all differences are visible. We have socioeconomic background, mental health, physical health, etc. How do you include that demographic in your DEI strategy? That's a great question.
Fantastic question. So Eve, what we do is we, and again, this is, I have to be honest, only recently we've clocked onto this and we're addressing this. So we seek it. We go to where the diversity is and we proactively go out and outreach there. So as an example, Andy Burnham up in Manchester has launched a program called the Young Person's Guarantee. During the pandemic, the recognition nationally, but definitely what they did in Manchester is they recognized we've got a generation of students, of young adolescents who have been almost lost, this lost COVID generation who have been tagged with, a couple of years you got off, you've had an easy ride through your education and your exams. But when you get close to those children, when you speak to them, you actually quickly realize the resilience that population, that cohort has built up and what they've experienced is incredibly valuable. That whole idea of remote working, how to build contacts, how to continue to progress, how to deal with that from a mental health perspective as well. So Andy Burnham wanted to do something with that cohort. So what we did is partnered with the mayor to really bring education and awareness around our life sciences sector, because we were trying to bring awareness. And when you ask students, 16, 14, 15-year-olds about pharmaceuticals, life sciences, they think boots, they think pharmacy, and I don't want to work in a pharmacy. So when you start explaining to them the things that we do, you can see the revelation. And then we also did things like working with them on personal development type topics. So we did the Colours program, which I'm sure many of you have done, to understand your own personality. And one of the students, it stays with me now, just described how life altering that educational session was, because they never really understood why they react to things in a certain way, why they behave in a certain way. So when they're talking to their parents or teachers, so it wasn't until they actually really sought to understand themselves. So that individual obviously realized something about our sector and how we work and the things that we do that they wouldn't have done otherwise. And then what we've done again is partnering with some of the universities up there is to support their pharmaceutical development programs, research programs, and also some of the stuff that's happening from a STEM perspective in the schools. We've got employees up there as well. We forget we've got people working up and down the country in these communities. They're members of those communities. So we've tasked our employees also to get more involved locally. So rather than going into a GP practice and speaking to the GP, to look around and think, where are the opportunities for us to be able to support more from a community perspective? So the answer is go there, go into those communities, and then work in that community to directly bring the diversity into your organization from there.
Thank you for that, Uday. I'm going to just add on that something that we've been doing at Page. So what we've done is we've actually broken down our DEI strategy into different strands to make it easier to do that. So initially we only started off with women at Page, and that has grown since. So now we have unity at Page, is for our ethnically and culturally diverse colleagues. We have women at Page. Sorry, we have parents at Page or families at Page, and then now we also now have ability at Page. Ability at Page is for our physically disabled or neurodiverse colleagues, but also people with mental health challenges, for example. That strand is specifically to support them. Initially, when we put our ability approach strategy, it focused a little bit more on our physical disability, like you mentioned. But we've expanded that now because, like you rightly said, Eve, like some people have I'm neurodiverse, for example, and not until we actually put into place our ability approach strategy and my manager made us go through an assessment, that's how I found out I was dyslexic. So there are things that we actually started to put in place. I should be like, right, okay, what are the things that we can do to support our colleagues? What are the resources in place that we're doing to support that? Socioeconomic background is one that is a little bit tricky sometimes because it's sometimes hard to tell people's like upbringing and financial status and stuff. So we started to work a little bit more with charities that support that. So for example, Social Mobility Foundation and Leadership Through Sports and Business. They're both social mobility charities. And like Uday said, the more that we work with that charities, the more that we support them, the more that we as a business, we understand the things that we can put in place to support our employees who come from lower socioeconomic background, but also we're supporting a community as well. So the more we do that as well, like we're sort of raising awareness on like the different initiatives that are in place to support those people too. So these are some of the things that we're doing. Do we have any other questions? Again, conscious we have 8 more minutes left. I'm going to do a summary in a bit, but just any other questions from the audience? Anything in particular that anyone wanted to clarify, wanted us to speak a little bit more on? Okay, and just to conclude then, because we've spoken about quite a few things here, Goss and Uday, thank you so much for all the knowledge shared. I think for me, the last thing I want to ask is, we're talking a lot more about bringing people into this industry and making it a more diverse organization. In the recruitment process, how can organizations encourage more diversity? So is it whether through working with recruitment agencies or the actual recruitment process itself? What are the things that can be done through the recruitment process to encourage more diversity into the industry?
Bolo, I think that there are 2 limbs there. One is the work with the recruitment agencies and the recruitment process in itself. What we do, and has been really a very positive experience for us, is we try to only ask questions that are really relevant to the recruitment process. For instance, I see quite a lot of people, tell us what are your grades of your A-level results. Well, if someone that was not educated in this country, they were not going to have an A-level. And that in itself excludes quite a lot of people. I was a victim of that. I had earned my career 2 great law firms. One of them have one of those very long online questionnaires where I ask all sorts of weird questions that I could not provide because I'm a foreigner. I was not educated in this country originally. And the other one asked me for a CV and a cover letter. Guess who I end up working with? So that's, we do, for as long as I'm around, we're never going to use algorithm for selection. We need humans selecting, and we need to work with recruiters that really...
Sorry, Goss, are you talking about the recruitment databases, the DEI recruitment database softwares? Is that what you're speaking about right now?
Exactly. We will not use, we're not going to be on this fancy high tech, even though we are a very science-driven organization. Humans need to be on the front line.
I agree.
To make those calls.
I agree.
We take our time to only work with recruiters that really get diverse and inclusion, because if we have worked with someone for 5 years and we haven't received a single CV of someone that has a disability or a single person from a diverse group, we have to ask our question. There's something wrong here. They are casting their net in the wrong place. Our CVs, the way we operate, they have to be blind. When we receive CVs from recruiters, we don't want names, we don't want gender, we don't want nationality, we don't want age, we don't want anything. We want just the core of the CV. The recruiter might know, hopefully they know, we don't. We look at that and then we tell the recruiters where is candidate A, C, and F that we want to interview. And at that point, we are told about the human behind it. That completely changes the dialogue for us, because we're really focusing whether that person has the skills we are looking for or not. But going one step back, we do like, obviously, academic achievements, but more important for us is what has this person done with the opportunities given to him or her during their lifetimes. So, and this message that stuck with me 25 years ago on my first day at university back in the US, where the dean said, guys, you come from 122 different countries. We cannot compare different applications. We cannot compare you with each other because you come from different socioeconomic life circumstances. The way we select people is by looking at what have you done with the opportunities that were given to you in your life until now, because that's a good predictable.
Yeah, so sorry, guys. Sorry to interrupt you. We only have 3 minutes left. So I just want to quickly round up. Uday, just any quick things you want to add to that in regards to how to make recruitment more inclusive? Just quick 5 points.
Very quickly. The people react to what they see. So if you're trying to recruit people like me, have people like me recruit me. If you go to a university stand and put up very mature, white, age, elderly individuals, and you're trying to attract a diverse population of young Generation Z colleagues, you're probably going to struggle. So just think about what your employees are seeing, and leverage that. And if you have a voice, if you have an opportunity, represent your community and stand up for them. That's what I'm saying.
That is a brilliant point. Absolutely. Thank you all so much. And
follow. Sorry, just 1 second. If I could just want to quickly say something just on neurodiversity, because I wholeheartedly agree about having humans on the front line. The only thing I'd say is, and this is really new to the conversation, when we look at neurodiversity and we take autism, for example, autism has a gift to give to the life sciences industry, brilliant with attention to detail, an alternative approach to problem solving, and impeccable on process. But their weakness, as a general rule, to be fair, but their weakness is around social and communication. So putting them in a human-based interview process doesn't always benefit that individual. So it's so important as an industry we have a blend, because otherwise we alienate that population, and they represent such a huge opportunity for our industry, and I'm a massive advocate of it. So I just wanted to quickly throw that out there, because I think we often forget it.
On that point there as well, we've been reviewing a lot of automated ways to recruit, and unfortunately a lot of them are built with biases. A lot of them are built with information on previous hiring successes, which most of the time doesn't include people who are neurodiverse. So we always just say in the interview process, we always ask people, do you require any reasonable adjustments? Because then if you do, if somebody has disclosed, for example, they're autistic, we would always make sure that who meets them has an awareness of what that means for them in the interview process as well. So I agree, it can be a blend, but also just asking the questions to people when you're doing the application process. What do you need for me to support you? So if it's humans, I'm meeting them, they can support them, because sometimes not all organizations can afford the tech to have, to do that as well. So just put in that. One last thing I'm going to add in terms of the recruiting for diversity and ensuring, Gus mentioned this point actually, ensuring that you're only asking the questions that are actually relevant. EY, I believe it was not recently, a couple of years ago, implemented this thing called PTR. It stands for preference, tradition, and requirement. And every time a hiring manager came to them and said, I needed somebody from a Redbrook University that needed this, that needed that, next to each requirement, the manager has to put, is it a preference? Is it a tradition? Is it a requirement? And the recruiters would only look at the things that are a requirement for the job. Going to a Redbrook University doesn't guarantee that you're going to be good at a job. Being able to, do certain things doesn't mean that you're going to be good at the job. So it was a way of bringing managers back to looking at the things that are actually really important. What are the skills you need to do the job? Do you need communication skills? Do you need negotiation skills? Those are the things we'll focus on, not looking at things like how your CV is formatted, or what university you went to, or whether you got a 2-1 or a 2-2, because there's so many different factors that can affect people's scores at university. So the one thing I'd advise, just off the back of that question, is scaling back the questions I ask in the recruitment process, and make sure you're only asking competency-based questions, not questions that can encourage bias in the process. What sports do you do? What this, do that? Because again, being able to play a sport or being able to swim or those other things doesn't mean you're going to be good at the job. So scaling back the questions that you ask in the interview process to ensure that bias doesn't come into that. And on that note, I will end. Thank you all so much. Thank you for the questions in there. Thank you to our fantastic panel, Uday and Gus. You guys have been great, and Ryan as well for putting this together.
If you found this video helpful for your recruitment journey, why not subscribe to our channel? And don't forget to tap the bell to get the latest videos first.